Part 104. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1032. Returning to the starry sky, Lily seemed to have put down all her guard and sat down on the ground. This time the mission was indeed completed because of Zhang Hongai's mistake. The original owner longed for the unparalleled hero she wanted to marry. The funny thing about the heroic dream in the girl's heart was not from Yeshizhe, but from Zhang Hongai, whom she had always looked down on and disliked. For the first time, Lily really wanted to know, if the girl named Zhou Beihe was still conscious and came back in circles, the person who became her initial knot, after cleverly changing directions, became her solution again. The existence that opened her heart and fulfilled her wish. I don't know how Zhou Lily felt in her heart. It's a pity that she can't see it. She only pity the man named Zhang Hongai. He is a well-deserved unparalleled hero. Wiping her face, Lily sighed, and her information reappeared in the starry sky. Gender, female, variable. Name, Lily. Age, 21. Intelligence, 90, out of 100. Appearance, 93, out of 100. Physical strength, 90, full score of 100. Force, 90, out of 100. Spirit, 90, out of 100. Reputation, 19, out of 100 points. Skills, 9 Yang Manual, 9 Yin Manual, Heaven and Earth Gate Tao Te Ching, Southern Gu Technique, Star Body Training Technique. Specialties, Advanced Cooking Skills, Advanced Acting Skills, 5 Elements and Bagua Skills, Proficient, B Control Skills. Charisma, 60, out of 100. Mark, Royal True Dragon Spirit. Now, except for the reputation and charm value, the other attribute values have reached over 90, but the reputation value is still very low. She just didn't know what the use of this thing was. Lily vaguely guessed that low reputation value would affect the favorability of others towards her in the mission plot, and determine whether others should respect or dislike her. After all, the ordinary characters in the previous missions and plots did not generally have a good impression of her. During the previous interstellar mission, it happened that a certain Starfield group did not like her and wanted to expel her. This was something she figured out on her own after several missions. Just because Li Yangzi is not in the starry sky, everything can only be guessed by herself, and she doesn't know whether it is correct or not. She slowly closed her eyes and entered the task again. Fuya, you can't be soft-hearted this time. Even if you are soft-hearted, I won't allow it. A deep male voice rang in Lily's ears. The surrounding area seemed extremely empty, so quiet that Lily seemed to be able to hear only my own dong-dong heartbeat. The man said the word Fuya at once. Her eyes began to become moist inexplicably, and a dull pain began to spread from her heart like a tide, quickly grinding her body, causing her whole body to curl up instinctively, and she reached out to hug her. It was tight, but his hands and feet were stiff and unable to move at all. My mind felt like a ball of mush. The original owner seemed to be sleeping very deeply, but since she had entered the mission, if the original owner had just fallen asleep, she would have woken up after entering the mission. However, Lily still felt that her mind was in a mess. This should be due to some kind of restriction imposed on the original owner. Under such circumstances, she obviously cannot accept the plot. The pain welling up in her heart should be the instinctive emotion of the original owner because she has not yet been able to fully accept this body. I just don't know who Fuya is and who the man who spoke is. I want to send her away. I can't always let her stay with me all her life. Aiken. When Lily grows up, she should also have her own life. You have also seen the changes in her these days. This is the best thing for her. Okay, a calm and decisive female voice sounded, but her voice was not feminine. Instead, there was a bit of indifference, as if he was just listening to the voice. The speaker's appearance can be seen before his eyes. The man was silent after being treated like this by her, And the woman continued. Because I'm with you, she can't accept it at all. Now I have your flesh and blood in my belly. In the past, because she was my sister, I could ignore her nonsense, but not now, the woman said here, after a pause. She doesn't have any mental power. In this star field, an appearance like her will only become someone else's plaything. Now I give her to Xiaoyu just because of our sisterhood. Go ahead and finally make some plans for her. Even if she hates me, one day she will understand that I am doing it for her own good. As long as you make up your mind, I can't stand her anymore. If it weren't for you, for your sake, baby, I would have torn her alive. There was something in the man's words. They were both bored and disgusted, and neither of them spoke anymore. After a long time, the woman panted and said, I know how you feel about me, but she and I have always been sisters. Now I have done the last thing I can do. She and I will have nothing to do with each other in the future. I have done enough for her. If she comes to provoke us again in the future, I don't care what you do to her. She said this and paused. But the Xiao family's caravan travels across the stars. I'm afraid we may never see this difference again in my lifetime. Don't be sad. People like this don't deserve your sadness. You should still be careful about the child in your belly. The man comforted her softly, and the woman responded softly, I know. There was no other sound after that, and Lily fell into a deep sleep. When she woke up, it felt like a huge mountain was pressing down on her body. Someone was tearing her clothes apart. A mouth moved around her chin and neck, and a wet kiss was placed on her body, which made goosebumps appear all over her body. Lily's eyelids were still a little sore. She opened her eyes and saw a man pressing on her. Lily stretched out her legs to kick him, but her whole body was soft. His thick palms were groping at her waist and legs, as if they were beating from her heartbeat. As Lily woke up and felt the temperature on her skin, the man who was busy kissing her neck and chest raised his head. The man was about 30 years old, with his upper body naked and his mouse-colored hair neatly tied up. The oil comb was combed on the back of her head, revealing her smooth forehead. He has a pair of slender eyes, slightly small eyes, a hooked nose, and thin lips that make his face look a bit sinister and mean. Are you awake? It's so quick. His tone was a little gloomy. I don't know if those lips had kissed her neck just now, but now they were very eye-catching on his fair skin. He saw Lily open her eyes, pulled down his pants, reached out and grabbed Lily's long, straight black hair, forcing her to lift her upper body up. I just fell asleep, I'm bored playing. Now that you're awake, it's your turn to serve. He had an expression of contempt, his eyes were light in color and even more ruthless. He pulled off his pants and showed his almost half-naked body in front of Lily without concealment. His attitude was contemptuous. It was not that he was not ashamed of his exposed body, but in his eyes, he only regarded Lily. She treated her like a plaything and didn't treat her as a living person at all. Lily's eyes suddenly narrowed. The thing dangling in front of her eyes made her feel a murderous intention. Her scalp was pulled by someone, as if a piece of her hair was about to be torn off. However, this body was so weak that it was impossible to. There was no way to struggle. Her lack of cooperation made the man with brown hair suddenly become a little impatient, and there was a bit of coldness in his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up, and he smiled like a fake smile. The muscles in his cheeks twitched slightly. The hand on the firm part of his body was raised, and he was about to slap her. The next moment, there was a loud boom sound, and the ground began to sway. The man could not stand steadily and did not care about grabbing Lily's hair anymore. It was dangerous. He nearly fell to the ground and raised his upper body awkwardly, with a look of surprise on his brows. Boom, just after the loud noise, there was another loud noise. This echo was louder and more violent than before. Lily's place seemed to have been attacked by some terror. She was lying on it. The bed he was lying on began to shake desperately. The man who had been propped up on the ground rolled twice on the ground in a panic due to the impact. Lily stretched out her hand to grab the edge of the bed and felt that her arms were numb. Only then could he stabilize his body. "What's going on?" the man who had been cold just now roared angrily like a wounded lion. Anyone who was interrupted at this juncture would be extremely angry. Lily has not yet received the plot. Except for the little news she heard when entering the mission, she has no clue in her mind at this time. She looked at the room that started to buzz and shake because of the attack she had just suffered. Both eyes and surroundings seemed to be sealed, and even the window opposite the bed was sealed with something like glass. The impact just now caused the glass to crack like a spider web, but it did not shatter. As soon as the man's roar sounded, his wrist beeped twice, and a light lit up. A figure about the size of a palm emerged from the light, and a mechanical voice sounded. "The spacecraft was attacked by an unknown object, and the defense has been activated. The hatch 16 on the southeast left has been broken, and the hatch 17 on the southeast right has been broken, and an unknown object has entered." The man had a ferocious look on his face, cursed twice, and was about to ask a question when the bright light flickered as if it had been disturbed by something. The light on the little man's body, it flashed twice and then went out. The next moment, the smooth and flat wall suddenly opened, and a panicked young man rushed in. "Master, we encountered interstellar pirates." As soon as he finished speaking, the dim light brain on the man's wrist began to light up again. This time, the little man appeared again, still looking the same as before, but the words he spoke became, "Gather in the lobby, I'll give you a dozen." To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1033. The man who was still lying on her before saw that his optical brain was not under his control, and his face suddenly turned ugly. He didn't know what he thought of, gritted his teeth, and got up. The guard guarding outside the door saw the scene and hurriedly reached out to pull him. Just after the spacecraft was attacked, it was still buzzing and shaking. The man took off the optical brain from his wrist and threw it away. He didn't even bother to put on his clothes. He lifted his pants and pointed them at his wrist for some reason. After a few instructions from the intermittent connector, he quickly went out and disappeared behind the door. Soon Lily heard the sound of a mecha flying at high speed, and the man's footsteps were no longer heard. The wrist optical brain that had just been torn off on the ground was still emitting a faint blue light, and the little man on it was counting in a mechanical tone, 1, 2, 5. Lily hurriedly climbed out of bed. She hurriedly rushed out of the door she had opened before. There was a long corridor outside, and she didn't know where the lobby meeting the other party mentioned was. This man who only said in his mind that he wanted to count from 1 to 10 was not trustworthy at all. She didn't know what this man had done, but Lily had a hunch that if she had gone a few steps late, the consequences would definitely not be too good. She stumbled and ran along the corridor. She didn't know where the hall was. She didn't know what kind of medicine someone had given her before. Now she was top-heavy. When she ran, her head hurt as if someone had stabbed her with a needle. She was nauseated and dull. The feeling was suffocating in her chest, and a feeling of vomiting came to her heart. Every few steps she took, her head felt dizzy, but Lily didn't dare to stop at this moment. The optical brain machine that was thrown into the room was still shouting, 7, 8. Before the word 9 could be shouted out, there was a sudden boom and the whole spacecraft began to tremble again. Lily was carried away by this force and the ship began to tilt. When she landed on the ground, she was carried by the force of inertia and slid to the side of the intersection. From the corner of her eye, she could only see the room she had just stayed in behind her. A green flame ignited. The room was burned red and shiny, and it was unknown what the board was made of, and it had not yet melted. But if anyone stayed in that room, they would probably be boiled alive. Lily herself kept counting in her heart. He didn't count to 10 at all. Obviously, the person who broke into the spacecraft who said he was given 10 times was just a casual comment. As soon as she slipped out, she accidentally fell into a hall. The hall was arranged like a bar. There was a thin man wearing a white protective suit, as clean as dirt, with shiny black hair. The tall figure was sitting in front of a small white antique piano, and his slender white fingers seemed to be dancing on it. The sweet notes jumped out under the pressure of his fingertips, filling the entire hall. There were nearly 100 people crowded into the hall, but these people were sitting on the ground obediently, not daring to breathe. The hall was eerily quiet, as if a group of people were quietly listening to a concert. The sound of Lily sliding into the hall made the piano player's fingers pause, and the notes suddenly stopped. The sound stopped. Nearly 100 people in the hall trembled. Needless to say, Lily knew who the visitor who had just broken into the spaceship was. However, she really did not expect that so many people in the spaceship would be restrained by one person. At this time, he seems to be very honest. "Madam, has anyone ever taught you that you should knock on the door when you enter? You can only come in after I say please come in," the piano player sighed. Half turned his head. His excessively long fringe almost hung under his eyes. His straight hair was so black that it was almost blue, casting shadows under his eyelids. Only a faint hint of color could be seen through his narrow eyebrows. Eyes. And the beautiful curve of the jaw, the color of the lips is as light as transparent. Holding tightly at this moment. It seemed that these people were all afraid of him. As soon as he started to speak, Lily noticed that many people lowered their heads, looking like they wanted to cover their ears. Unfortunately, she hadn't accepted the plot yet and didn't know what was happening in front of her. What the hell is a man? At this time, his eyes had not yet fallen on Lily, but an invisible pressure made her unable to get up. A lot of cold sweat broke out from Lily's back vest. She had a hunch that if she didn't reply, she would probably be unlucky today. But if she replied, the man might not let her go. "I'm sorry, I also hope that I can come here with dignity, but after hearing your call, I never dare to stop and meet you in this manner." Lily lowered her attitude very low, and the young man, hearing her say this, a bit of melancholy appeared on her eyebrows. "Such a beautiful art has been interrupted," he sighed, and suddenly raised the corner of his mouth. "Then madam, I will give you a chance now. If you can tell me the name of the song I just played, then I will consider letting you go temporarily. If not," he said, paused, and began to hum a song in his nervous mouth. "For art, someone should sacrifice their life." The singing echoed back and forth in the hall, making the hair on one's body stand on end. To be honest, this young man didn't know what song he was singing, but his voice was very pleasant, as if it was clean and transparent, without a trace of impurities. Even humming a few random words made people relax. But at this time in this strange hall, everyone was originally afraid of him. When he sang, a group of people were covered in cold sweat and their clothes were soaked. Lily tried her best to think about the few notes he had just heard, but the tune he hummed came into her mind. The sweat beads on her forehead gathered into small streams, flowing into her eyes from between her eyebrows. Her eyes felt stinging and a little uncomfortable, but she didn't dare to rub them at this moment. "That piano music is very familiar to me, but it's just because I haven't heard many tunes, and it seems that he played it wrong in some places." But Lily didn't dare to correct him, she just made some trembling guesses. "Call Adelina by the water." She didn't know if her answer was right or not, so she just swallowed and waited for his answer. The young man's singing stopped suddenly and he turned around in surprise. Only then did Lily see that he was younger than she thought. He was about 17 or 18 years old. His face was pale and his temperament was slightly cold and feminine. The white protective clothing wrapped him tightly from top to bottom, and he didn't know what material it was made of. It was worn softly and snugly on him, as if there were no gaps. His brows were sparse, and his appearance looked like an ink painting. So pure and handsome, but what is surprising is not the delicate face, but the pure and light temperament, like mountain spring water. When he heard Lily's words, two sickly blushes appeared on his pale cheeks, and he tilted his head to look at her. So it's Adelina by the water. It turned out that he himself didn't know what the name of the song was. Lily felt her head hurt even more for a moment. She didn't know what he was going to do to her, so she just stayed silent and didn't dare to say anything. She rolled up her body and climbed into the crowd of 100 or so people carefully, trying not to attract attention because she was too special. The young man watched with cold eyes and did not say a word to stop her. She knelt down close to the edge of the crowd. Unfortunately, she arrived too late and was not squeezed into the middle of the crowd. Otherwise, she would have been safer. However, her thoughts were shattered by the young man's actions at the next moment. The young man saw her crawling into the crowd, squinted his eyes and tilted his head quietly for a while, and then suddenly pointed towards the crowd. Come out. He was referring to an inconspicuous woman in the middle of the crowd. It seemed that she was a maid who originally served on the spaceship. As soon as this girl was called, her legs were so frightened that her legs became weak and she couldn't get up at all. People around her looked at her. After being clicked, they subconsciously crawled farther away from her. There was an open space around her, and she was isolated in the middle. Her body shook even more fiercely. The teeth in this woman's mouth were shaking, but she couldn't shout out a single word. The boy put one hand on the piano and supported his chin with the palm of his hand. The keys of the piano were pressed, making a harsh tune. The sound comes. What is 1 + 1 equal to? Everyone thought he was going to ask something, but they didn't expect him to open his mouth and ask such a simple question. Lily's body stiffened, but she felt something was wrong. The woman who had been isolated from the crowd before heard that he only asked such a question, and her face showed joy, but she seemed to be confused about his attitude. She always felt that this young man had hijacked the spaceship, and he could not just ask her such a simple question out of boredom. So he hesitated to speak out the answer, fearing that if he made a mistake, he would end up with a tragic end. The hall was quiet for a while, and suddenly the boy snapped his fingers. Before the woman could even scream, a blue shadow flashed past, and there was a soft boom sound, and her originally delicate face was pierced by the blue shadow. Toru, the next moment her headless body fell to the ground with a bang. The skin around her neck was burned to a yellowish color. It was obviously cooked, which prevented the blood from flowing out. Her head was blasted into pieces by the blue light just now. It was shattered to pieces, not even a hair was left. The blue shadow hit her head and disappeared without a trace. Lily was terrified. She didn't even see why the young man had taken action just now, and he died. Come out. The young man pointed to another person casually. The person whose name was called by him could not even cry and crawled out of the column. He tilted his head with a gentle look on his face. 1 + 1 how much is it? Equal to 2, the woman just now was killed without even a chance to answer. This time the person whose name was called heard his question and hurriedly answered. The young man's slender eyes narrowed and curled up. The corners of his mouth curled up, showing a few neat white teeth. Lily only felt a sense of danger, and heard him say lazily, "You know too much." To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1034. Damn it! Lily's head was getting big at this moment, and with a bang, the person who had just answered to fell to the ground as usual, but this time it was not that his head was blasted through, but the middle of his body. A hole about the size of a bowl was made. Two people died one after another, and the hall was filled with the shadow of death. However, the young man did not give up and thought about asking someone to come out. What is 1 + 1? He also asked this question. If he didn't answer it, it would be incorrect. If he answered it correctly, he thought he knew too much. The people he called had a look of death on their face and their mouths were trembling quietly. With 3. This time he didn't even say anything. He only heard the sound of the corpse falling to the ground. The young man lazily pointed at another person. You, come out. 2. The voice of the person whose name was called trembled violently, and the young man was silent for a while. I don't want to ask what 1 + 1 equals anymore, you answered too quickly. It was wrong to say anything or not. Lily guessed that the young man did not want to ask questions at all, but just killed people because he wanted to kill people. Now everyone was panicking, and they were all afraid of being called by him. It was as if their necks were cut by the sickle of death when he pointed out their name. Whenever he called someone, the others would let out a long sigh of relief. And the cycle begins again. I don't know if Lily came in last, which attracted the young man's attention. Although she tried her best to shrink her legs, she was finally called by the young man. So, embarrassed lady, what is 1 + 1 equal to? Lily smiled bitterly twice. Her name was called, and the sound of relief from the people around her was so obvious that she could hear it clearly. There was no emotion in the young man's careless words. Bodies were scattered on the ground. Lily couldn't even see clearly what kind of methods the young man had used to kill people. She was not willing to sit and wait for death. But the time it took to enter the mission was short, and the plot was not accepted. Even if he wanted to resist, he would not be able to do any harm in front of this strange young man. Her heartbeat was as fast as a rabbit. After a while, Lily forced herself to calm down, her throat rolled twice, and then she slowly spoke. I'm sorry, I failed math since I was a child. As soon as she said these words, the young man's slender eyebrows suddenly curved like crescent moons. When he smiled, he had a pure and lovely feeling. If it weren't for this moment, there were corpses on the ground not far in front of him. No one could have imagined that this man with a smile as clean and transparent as crystal could kill so many people in the blink of an eye. Failed math? What a great answer! He bit his lip. After saying this, he laughed again. 1 + 1 plus is endless, in my opinion, they are all equal to 1, just like microscopic particles such as atomic nuclei and negatively charged electrons can form atoms, and atoms pass through a certain order and arrangement. It can form molecules. For example, a water molecule can be decomposed into hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms, so why should 1 + 1 equal 2, he said. His expression gradually became a little crazy, and his delicate eyebrows showed a bit of coldness and irritability. 1 + 1 equals 10,000 possibilities. Why is it that for such a simple question, you stupid humans like to be smart so much? His tone began to slowly become violent, as if he couldn't control himself, and he stood up. He came forward and took 2 steps on the same spot. The sound of the footsteps echoed in everyone's hearts, making people afraid to breathe. Lily's whole body was tense. She could already feel that the boy was in an extremely unstable state. He seemed unable to calm himself down completely. Just now he was like an angel, but now his temper was like that of a devil. He could turn his face faster than he could turn the page of a book. The moment he got up and walked around, the anger in his body did not subside a little with the killing he had just committed, but his face seemed to be getting uglier and uglier. A pale face showed a sickly blush. Lily suppressed the bad feeling in her heart and looked up, and saw that his eyes had turned a little blue at this time, and the delicate face was staring expressionlessly. She looked at it, her mouth tightened, and it was obvious that she was not in a good mood at this time. I'm in a very bad mood. He sat down again and began to fumble on the piano unconsciously. The antique piano made harsh and unpleasant music. He played in a disorganized manner. The more he played, the more condensed his expression became. The murderous intention seems to be real. Creak, he hit the keys of the antique piano hard, and the piano body let out a whine. He knocked 2 pieces of the white button off at once, and the movement he was playing suddenly stopped. Lips pursed tightly, head lowered at this time, the storm began to gather in his eyes, and his slender palms even began to clench into fists uncontrollably. The heartbeat of Dong 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 was so loud that everyone in the venue could hear it clearly. Lily felt something was wrong, and the moment the young man's eyes turned cold, he suddenly said, "I can play some Adilina by the water." Lily suddenly spoke, making everyone tremble. The young man turned his head and stared at her. His eyes were so cold that there seemed to be no warmth at all, because he turned around with the movement of her head. The thin stream on her forehead was still swaying slightly, and her slender eyes were staring at her coldly. It wasn't until Lily panicked that he suddenly raised his wrist. Jian Guang's brain lit up. The spacecraft has a total of 30 temporary escape ordinary mechas, which are parked at the bottom of hatches 6 to 9. A voice similar to that of a young man sounded, and he glanced at Lily. "I don't like people touching my things, but for the sake of art, I will let the mecha in the cabin take you away. Can you survive? It depends on whether you are lucky enough or not." At this time, the young man raised his chin proudly, with a somewhat indifferent expression. "Goodbye, girl." The sound of mechanical rotation suddenly came from the originally closed cabin door, and a door was opened without warning. A large amount of strong wind poured in from the entrance. Lily's body was shaken by the blow, and she could hardly maintain her ability to kneel down. From her perspective, she could see the beautiful starry sky outside through the wide open hatch. Those bright planets were rotating like little stars, and a huge mechanical bird flew out of the entrance. "Come on." After giving the order, he suddenly rushed towards Lily. The strong wind brought by the huge wings made the white protective clothing on the young man's body begin to shake slightly. His hair was flying, and Lily was picked up by the mechanical bird and rushed out again. In the night sky, the door closed again. At the critical moment, Lily only grabbed the cold beak of the mechanical bird. She saw the young man bending down and waving to her with an innocent and cute smile. "You'll fall in love with the speed of flying freely." She cursed in her mouth, but when she opened her mouth, a large amount of strong wind blew in. She was led by the mechanical bird and began to fly away from the spacecraft. Below was a vast starry field, surrounded by twinkling stars. The planet seemed to be within reach of the halo, but in fact it was tens of thousands of light years away from her. It's not a good feeling to feel like your feet are not touching the ground and you can't help but there is no way out at this time. Lily tried her best to hold the mechanical bird's mouth. She didn't know where this thing was going to take her. Even because she didn't receive the memory and plot, she had no idea how to control this kind of thing. It seemed that she could only walk one step at a time. The bird began to fly downward. The speed of descent was so fast that her heart almost stopped breathing. This feeling of weightlessness made her grit her teeth and hold the mouth of the mechanical bird with both arms for a long time. Her body began to feel numb. If it hadn't been for this thing biting her body, she might have been unable to hold on and fell. The speed of descent was too fast, the strong wind as strong as a knife, coupled with the too fast heartbeat due to nervousness, the accelerated blood flow in the body, caused her body temperature to begin to lose a lot. Lily had been injected with an unknown drug before. Her head started to feel hazy at this time, but under such circumstances, she did not dare to let herself lose consciousness. Whenever she was about to faint, she would bite her tongue tightly, trying to use the severe pain to keep herself awake. I don't know how long it has been falling, but suddenly a rapid red light flashed in the eyes of the mechanical bird. Not enough energy, not enough energy. Lily wanted to scold her. She didn't know what energy was, not to mention she didn't have anything at the moment. The mechanical bird sounded majestic at first, but after only 2 or 3 minutes, the sound of urgent need for energy started to sound even louder, like a beep beep beep, like an alarm clock. In the end, the light in the mechanical bird's eyes dimmed, and when it retracted its wings, it transformed into an ordinary mecha shape and began to fall with her. Her body was still restrained by the mecha. There was really no way to deal with this situation. No. I don't know how long it took for it to fall, but the mecha finally fell to the ground with a boom. Lily felt a sharp pain in her limbs. She soon fell into darkness and fell unconscious. When she woke up again, she was pressed into a pile of scrap metal, as if someone was rummaging for something on the mecha. "There's someone here," a man's voice sounded. She must have been seriously injured. Although she was alert at this time, she couldn't move at all. Soon Lily heard another person say impatiently, "Don't worry about it. I can't see it here any day. Found a dead person? Found something valuable and left." The group of people cursed, dismantled the mecha, and took away the valuables, which indirectly removed some of Lily's weight. At the same time, in the United Nations of the galaxy and the major interstellar networks, a piece of major news was being broadcast. In the United Nations prison, a felon who had been imprisoned in an interstellar prison for 300 years escaped and hijacked the Xiao family's spaceship. Except for the owner of the Xiao family, one person escaped, and the other 300 people on the spaceship were all spared. The list will be announced later. It will be announced later. At present, the whereabouts of this terrorist maker are unknown. The United Nations spokesperson will contact you as soon as possible. On the news network, a virtual woman was telling the events that happened this time in a sweet voice. A man wearing an imperial uniform was now. He put his arms around a dazed woman and coaxed softly. "Fuya, it has nothing to do with you. She is finally dead." The woman murmured quietly, with a complicated look in her eyes. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1035. Lily woke up from a pile of scrap metal. The mecha that crashed with her was almost completely scrapped. In the past 2 days, almost all the valuable parts in the mecha had been picked up. She was lying like a dead body in the waste. Among the mecha scum, no one would give her a second glance. Her body was covered in dried blood, and it hurt a lot when she moved. Even though the scars on the outside had scabbed over, the scars on the inside were far heavier than the ones on the outside. Several flies were buzzing around her. She fell here due to lack of energy in the mecha. If the group of people who stole the mecha parts hadn't come to move the mecha, I'm afraid she would have been silent. Died here. Lily felt a chill in her heart when she thought of this. She had gone through so many missions, and in the end she almost disappeared from the mission without even knowing how she died. Her waist was originally bitten in the beak of the mechanical beak, but due to the inertia of the mecha when it fell, her waist was almost broken by the huge beak. Many bones in her body should have been broken, and there was numbness below the waist. After Lily regained consciousness, she tried her best to move her legs, but let alone moving her legs, in her current state, it was very difficult for her to even move her fingers. "Are you going to die here?" In the clear blue starlight above her head, a group of vultures were flying above her head, making clear calls from their mouths. They were obviously on guard, wanting to wait until the people below had no resistance before coming down to enjoy this delicious meal. A hearty meal. How could Lily be willing to wait for death? Even if she can't move at this moment. He took a deep breath. This was obviously not a good time to accept the plot and memories. Anyway, it couldn't get any worse. She could no longer take care of the mission for the time being. Her first priority was to save her life. She closed her eyes and tried her best to figure out the condition of her figure when her right arm landed on the ground. It must have been broken. Through her thick eyelids, she could clearly see that her white arm was bruised and swollen under the ragged clothes. Twisted at an extremely abnormal angle, the snow-white bones between the elbows even broke through the skin, exposing a section. Lily held back the pain and used great perseverance to move herself out of the deformed mechanical bird's mouth. The few people who were looking for things just now moved the positions of these useless mechas invisibly, and some broken mechas had already penetrated into her broken body. If she encounters those who come looking for things again, a little bit of damage will be done. It was enough to kill her. Just in the process of moving slowly. Even though it was just a small finger that moved, it affected her whole body. A heart-piercing feeling was transmitted from her nerve tips to her mind. Her originally chaotic thoughts suddenly became aroused, and she woke up on the spot. Most of it. Cold sweat broke out from her pores. To others, it was just a process of moving her arms, but the cold sweat flowing out of Lily's body gathered into a small stream. The blood on her body was washed away a lot. The severe pain caused her brain to slowly wake up, and the rancid smell mixed with the smell of blood came from her nostrils, making people want to vomit. The fly flapped its wings buzzingly, desperately trying to stay on her body. The lower body was numb and cold at the beginning, without any feeling. First, it hurt like needles, and then a dense dull pain submerged her like an overwhelming tide. Very good. Lily breathed a sigh of relief. The pain in her lower body proved that she was still conscious. She was afraid that her lower body would be paralyzed if she lost consciousness. Then something went wrong with this mission. Once paralyzed, her force value will be greatly reduced, and she can no longer practice star training, which is an extremely disadvantageous thing for her. It took most of the day. She moved some out of the mechanical beak, and the hard mechanical beak was squeezed loose by her. Lily rolled out of the mechanical bird's mouth with a plop and fell to the ground. When her originally injured body suffered this impact, Lily's eyes only felt black and severe pain hit her. She almost fainted on the spot. This is a row of dilapidated buildings. The place where the mecha fell made a huge hole in the buildings in this area. The ruins and broken walls were scattered on the ground, but not a single person was seen. It looked like it was noon at this time, but the streets were eerily deserted. These houses seemed to be a few years old and no one lived in them. There shouldn't be anyone coming to save her at this time. If she didn't save herself, I'm afraid she would be dead in a few days. Oh my God, those vultures above my head can come and eat her corpse. Lily took a deep breath and silently recited 1, 2, 3 in her mind, then gritted her teeth, with a ruthless look in her eyes, and pushed her elbow bone back to its original position. No matter how much she could bear it, the frightening pain that hit her heart still caused her body to break out in a lot of cold sweat. Feeling uncomfortably hungry, she licked her lips that had been bitten by her own bone setting, and began to count silently, groping around her body one by one for any broken bones. If she could straighten them, she would try her best to break the bones. Pushing it back to its original position, if it really didn't work, she would have to give up temporarily. Several bones in her chest were broken, and one of them had pierced her chest. If it weren't for her physical strength, which had reached an attribute value of over 90, she might not have been able to hold on at this moment. The bone couldn't be pushed back to its original position, and it hurt when she pushed it. She tried several times, but every time the pain was so painful that her body would instinctively give up. Over time, she sweated a lot, and the bone was not pushed back to its original position at all. On the contrary, because of all this torment, her body was dehydrated and lost too much blood, which made her start to feel flustered. She tried her best to stretch her body, trying to perform a star training movement. When she felt the spiritual energy around her slowly entering her body, Lily breathed a sigh of relief and carefully directed this spiritual energy around her body. Wonder. Because her posture for the star body training technique was not entirely correct, not much spiritual power entered her body, but the advantage was that when Lily first obtained the star body training technique, it came from this future time and space, and in this star in the domain, the starlight was far more intense than any plot, so that spiritual power entered her body and followed Lily's command to slowly repair her wounds. A large amount of water shortage and hunger coupled with blood loss made Lily's early training extremely difficult. Although the spiritual power of the star body training technique was useful, because of her serious injury, the posture of the star body training technique was not very correct, so she recovered. It had to be extremely slow, and it took almost 10 days before she could barely stand upright. Fortunately, she had the power to attract starlight into her body, so she barely managed to save her life during these 10 days. Although some external injuries on her body did not start to suppurate due to spiritual power, many wounds had already begun to become inflamed. The vultures above her head were not willing to leave easily, and were still circling around trying to devour her. Lily began to. She stood up while rubbing herself on the ground. This movement almost exhausted all the strength in her body. Holding onto the broken wall, she walked in this long abandoned street. The surroundings were deserted. There seemed to be no living person in the whole street. It was like an abandoned world, except for the vultures above her head that followed her movements. Lily couldn't hear a sound anymore as she circled around. There was no living person here, which meant there was no food. She took 2 steps and fell under the wall again. Looking at the clear sky above her head, a bold idea came to her mind. These vultures want to eat her flesh, but in the absence of food, Lily also wants to eat the flesh of these things if she wants to survive. She closed her eyes and pretended to be dead, and the weak spiritual power in her body slowly flowed along her veins, repairing the injuries in her body. The vultures were not fooled at first, but acted like seasoned hunters. Until it was dark, she remained motionless, as if she found that the prey had lost its vitality. 2 vultures landed tentatively, flapping their wings, and approached her, and pressed hard on her. Take a peck. A hole as big as the size of a thumb was pecked out in her thigh by the sharp eagle beak, and blood suddenly burst out. Lily endured the severe pain and remained motionless. The vulture seemed to have tasted the delicious food of its prey, and flapped its wings and flew away. After a while, Lily, the birds hovering in the sky, swooped down and began to peck at her with confidence. Lily endured the severe pain on her body. When a vulture was about to peck at her eyeballs, she reached out and grabbed the vulture's legs. Live. Frightened by this, the vulture flapped its wings and struggled desperately. The other invaders who were preparing a feast were frightened by this turn of events and fled quickly. Lily endured the pain of the wound on her body, grabbed the vulture's leg with one hand, grabbed its head with the other hand, and twisted it hard. She already had spiritual power in her body, but because her arm bones had been broken, even with the help of spiritual power, the vulture's neck was not broken. Instead, its sharp claws left a lot of scars on her body. Lily took a deep breath, twisted its neck hard, and finally bit it hard on the neck. The blood mixed with hair was bitten into her mouth. The fishy smell made her want to vomit as soon as she bit into her mouth. But at this critical moment, Lily still resisted the nausea and swallowed the blood. Middle. The dry lips were gradually soaked with blood and became much softer again. The vulture struggled desperately at first, but gradually its strength weakened. The vulture's body was eaten by Lily for 3 days, until the flesh began to rot. I just stopped eating. In the past 3 days, she had recovered a lot of her physical strength due to eating. In addition, as her wounds gradually recovered, she was able to straighten her waist. When she practiced the star body training technique, the effect was naturally better than before. Much better. Starting from the past few days, the vultures that had been guarding here began to disperse. This place was a dead city with absolutely nothing to eat. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1036. But since someone came to pick up the mecha fragments when she was in a coma, Lily speculated that there should still be people in this place, but this street should be deserted. After gaining some mobility, Lily was ready to leave here. There was nothing to eat here, and it seemed that all the moss on the ground had been scraped clean. After Lily could walk around, she saw all the streets. There is no water source here. If she stays here any longer, she will definitely not survive. Walking out of this abandoned street, Surrounded by a wilderness overgrown with weeds, Lily walked and rested for a while. When it was getting dark, she saw the lights of the city in the distance. The surroundings were extremely quiet, and the future century seemed to be very close to the stars. The large and small planets in the sky were emitting a light blue or purple halo, and the scene was beautiful under the night. Now that her injuries have improved a lot, and she has left the place where the plane crashed before, Lily is relieved when she sees the city, and is no longer in a hurry to enter the city. She first dug a shallow hole on the spot with her hands, lay down in it, covered herself with the dug weeds, and made a simple disguise. Then she closed her eyes and took in the plot of this mission. In the interstellar future, planets large and small form different empires and alliances. The largest alliance is the Galaxy Interstellar Alliance. There are nearly 300 planets under the alliance, making it the largest system in the entire galaxy. Among these planets, Prince Pluto is different from other planets. It also maintains ancient religions and tribes ruled by imperial power. On this Prince Pluto, the royal family that rules the planet's residence is named Hua, and every princess of the Hua family every generation born will hold the position of Saint of Pluto part-time. Every resident of Pluto is known throughout the entire star field for his strong spiritual power. Perhaps because of the nuclear magnetic field, every child born here will show excellent mental talents after birth, especially the Hua family of the royal family. Even more so. Among every 3 generations of royal princesses, there must even be one who can inspire supernatural powers. In the interstellar age, people's development of spiritual power has reached its extreme level. Everyone will have a certain amount of mental power, but the difference in mental power lies in the level of SAVK. The existence of supernatural powers is something that many top scientists have not been able to study for nearly 1,000 years. Superpowers exist with blood. Except for a few bloodlines in the star field, very few humans can inspire supernatural powers. In the history of the interstellar world, the total number of humans who have inspired supernatural powers has not exceeded 100 people for thousands of years. The superpower is extremely lethal. It's just that with the development of science and technology, after people have optical nuclear weapons, as well as various mechas and warships, personal strength does not seem so important in front of mechas. In this generation of the Hua family, in addition to the prince and other princes, 2 princesses were born. Compared with the bad habits of favoring sons over daughters in the early ancient Earth period. Among the princes of Pluto, the status of princesses is no worse than that of the princes. They are in charge of religion, and the princes of the royal family inherit the throne and jointly rule the prince of Pluto. It is difficult for the Hua family to have daughters. Princes can give birth to a few in each generation, but daughters are extremely rare. In the past 500 years, each generation of direct members of the royal family can only give birth to 1 princess. The people of Pluto are I am afraid that the legacy of religion will be cut off. In this generation, the Hua family has special powers every 3rd generation. All the major planets in the star field are staring at Pluto. However, in the past 20 years, the Hua family has had 2 princesses successively. When the eldest princess was born, the entire galaxy did not take it seriously, just because of the 3-generation inheritance. A little extra attention was paid to the eldest princess, and when the little princess was born, the whole planet was shaken. Pluto has always had only 1 princess, so every generation of religious saints is automatically succeeded by this princess. In the past 1,000 years, these princesses have done extremely well, and there has never been an exception. When everyone thought that the eldest princess would definitely inherit this generation of saints from Pluto Prince had another little princess. Firstly, the position of the saint attracted attention, and secondly, where did the Hua family's superpowers come from? Which princess was born? When the eldest princess was born, she had already made a marriage agreement with Gu Chen, the son of the military minister of the Galaxy Alliance. Although in the coming century, engagement is already a very ancient and unfeasible covenant for many people. Among some large planets and aristocratic families, the traditions of the early Earth period are still maintained. The Hua family has unique. She has excellent mental talent and possesses superpowers passed down through blood. Although in the history of the Milky Way, the chance of having superpowers in the bloodline passed down to children by daughters marrying outside their families is pitifully small, but to this day, they still have superpowers. There are many people who are still happy for that 1 in 10 million possibility. Gu Chen, the son of the Minister of Military Affairs of the Galaxy Interstellar Alliance, was born far beyond the Prince of Hades and the eldest princess. He was 10 years older than the eldest princess. When the two decided to get married, the eldest princess was still in her infancy. Although the Gu family is not a royal family, but in the galactic century, it has extremely powerful power. Although the eldest princess is born into the royal family, Prince Pluto is just a subplanet under the Galactic Star Alliance. The eldest princess is considered to be marrying high, even though Gu Chen is much older, but in the interstellar future, people's age is no longer as short as 100 years like in the ancient Earth period. As long as they can cultivate their spiritual power to the extreme, even if they live for 300 years, it will not be a problem. This short 10-year gap is naturally nothing. As an unmarried couple, the two were childhood sweethearts with a very deep relationship. Before the little princess was born, in the heart of the eldest princess, apart from her father, queen, mother, brothers, and the children of Pluto, Gu Chen was her dearest. However, after the little princess was born, whether it was because of the innate blood relationship or the unique relationship between sisters, the eldest princess Huafui's love for her sister far exceeded everyone's imagination. When people thought that the two princesses would compete for the position of the future saint, Huafui fell in love with her sister, and even Gu Chen was jealous because of it. When Huabei grew up to 15 years old, Huafui was already 25. In the interstellar period, men were 30 years old, while women were considered adults at the age of 25. Her wedding to Gu Chen was originally supposed to be arranged in Huafui. When Ya was coming of age at her 25th birthday, when she saw her sister, she suddenly couldn't let her go. Gu Chen was 10 years older than her and had been waiting for her for 5 years to marry her, but she suddenly couldn't let go of her sister. At this critical moment, she even made the decision to give up the religious sainthood that she was supposed to inherit. Position: pass this position on to Hualili. In the Pluto Prince, Hualili's identity is very embarrassing. She is not the eldest daughter. The most important thing is that the people in the Pluto Prince have been hiding a secret for her. Huafui is born with outstanding mental power, but Hualili is not the eldest daughter. She has the blood of the royal family of Pluto, but she has no mental power at all. If the matter spreads, it will be a very serious blow to the Pluto Prince star royal family. For many years, the royal family has been trying to find out why Huabei has no spiritual talent, but in the end nothing happened. Many people who knew the inside story were very puzzled by Huafui's actions. She has a beautiful appearance, and even has excellent mental power and talent. This is a rare thing in the records of the Pluto Prince and the Hua family. It is very possible for her to have supernatural powers, but she has to give up. She gave up her position as a saint because she was worried that her sister would feel inferior when she grew up. Her fiancé Gu Chen knew her love for Hualili. Although he didn't understand the purpose of Huafui's actions, he was very supportive of her. At the same time, the Nai family in the Emperor Star sent people to secretly contact the Hua family, hoping that the Hua family could hand over Hualili to them for research. The Imperial Planet is an independent planet outside the Galactic Era. It does not belong to any empire or the Galactic Interstellar Alliance. There are only about 1.5 billion inhabitants on this planet. The population is not large, and the strength is not great. But they have the most advanced scientists and scientific research equipment. The Nai family wanted to exchange Hualili from the Hua family at the price of 15 new mechas. Mechas have become popular in the galaxy century. As long as you have a certain amount of mental strength, you can control mechas. However, the mechas produced by the Nye family are definitely the best mechas in the entire galaxy, especially their new mechas. It can be driven into battle, and can be shrunk into personal armor, which can be worn on the body as thinly as clothes. However, although this new type of mecha is powerful, it also requires a higher level of mental power. In the past, Prince Pluto only believed in his own spiritual power, focusing on practicing physical skills plus spiritual power and other 5 elements of natural power. He was not good at mechas originally. If he gets the Nye family's mechas, his strength will be even more powerful for the Hua family. The Nye family's mechas are hard to come by, even if it costs hundreds of millions of alliance coins, especially this new type of mecha. The Nye family never sells it in the star field other than the Emperor's planet. It is considered one of their unique secret weapons. It is precisely because of these new mechas that in the crisis-ridden galaxy, the Emperor can be independent from the galaxy and not be incorporated by the Alliance. Logically speaking, the little princess of the Hua family has no mental power and is just a waste, and she has not been seen to activate supernatural powers. If she can get these 15 new mechas from the Nye family, she will not suffer any loss in exchange, but Hua Fuya flatly refused. This refusal led to the Nye family's revenge. The Nye family drove a mecha and forced the people of Pluto to hand over Hua Lily, but they never thought that the entire Pluto planet was far more loyal to the Hua family than other planets. A war breaks out between the two planets. Although the people of Pluto have outstanding mental strength, in the face of the explosion of powerful mechas and optical nuclear weapons, the Hua family is no match for them. Amid the raging war, Pluto disappeared from the star field. To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1037. In the future galaxy, there will be hundreds of thousands of planets like Pluto. For many people, the destruction of a planet will be nothing more than sighing and talking about it for a few days, just like a pebble thrown into water. Although it can stir up temporary waves, it will always sink. During the battle that day, the Huafua sisters were desperately protected and sent away by the residents of Pluto at the critical moment, and the entire Pluto disappeared into the Milky Way. 2 years later, Gu Chen lost his beloved fiancée. With overwhelming hatred, he proposed sanctions against the Nye family of the Emperor planet on the grounds that the people of the Emperor planet violated the Human Peace Convention, and attacked the Nye family. In this battle, Gu Chen's victory in the first battle is known to the world. Perhaps he was stimulated by the death of his fiancée that day. His mental strength was suddenly upgraded from B and to a level. He controlled a mecha and was fighting against the Nye family. Since then, in this war, the once technologically advanced Emperor planet was destroyed by Gu Chen, and the remaining tribesmen became interstellar pirates, wandering around like bereaved dogs all day long. The family feud between the two sisters was avenged by Gu Chen. When Hua Bei thought that the two sisters finally no longer had to hide their secrets, she discovered that her sister, who had always loved her deeply, gradually became cold towards her after the Nye family was destroyed. She took herself to find Gu Chen, and changed her previous attitude of not wanting to leave her sister and marry him, and married Gu Chen. Gu Chen was her childhood sweetheart and loved her to the core. He thought his sweetheart was dead and didn't want to marry again, but suddenly found out that his sweetheart was still alive. Overjoyed, the two held a grand wedding. Hua Lily thought that all the hardships were over. At that time, she discovered that her sister had changed. The way her sister looked at her often made her hair stand on end. And before she knew it, she began to be isolated by the Gu family inexplicably. She felt that her sister who loved her before seemed to be becoming more and more impatient with her as time went by. That look sometimes made Hua Lily feel scared. When she was young, she did not have the mental talent of the Hua family. Although Hua Fei never said it, Hua Lily felt very inferior in her heart. She was taciturn and introverted. When Pluto was still there, she had always been closest to Hua Fei. After Pluto was destroyed, she watched her hometown where she lived in the past disappear under the flames of war. After such stimulation, her character became more and more introverted. When they were wandering outside, the two sisters had always been dependent on each other. Hua Fei was there to provide food and drink for her. She almost knelt on the ground and begged others. Hua Lily couldn't understand why her sister had changed in just 1 year. It seemed that after her brother-in-law Gu Chen avenged the two sisters, she began to change. Did she also think that she had killed the billions of people on the planet Pluto? When the Sun Pluto Prince star was destroyed, Hua Bei knew that the people from the Emperor star had made deals with the Hua family precisely because the Hua family wanted to protect her. That was the reason why Pluto became extinct. Hua Bei felt guilty about this. To her, Hua Fei is more than just her sister. The two of them are the only surviving tribesmen on Pluto. Their relationship is far closer than that of sisters. Could it be that her sister also blames her for killing Pluto? Father, queen, mother, queen, brothers, and those thousands of people? Hua Bei was frightened and uneasy all day long, and her courage began to weaken. Even whenever I stay at Gu's house, there is always a feeling of being under someone else's roof, and I don't even dare to take a step out of my own door, for fear that I will offend my sister. But under such circumstances, the relationship between the two sisters did not improve much. Do not know why. Gu Chen began to dislike her more and more. He used to be a house-loving brother-in-law. The look in her eyes showed impatience and disgust. Hua Fei is pregnant. Hua Lily is actually very happy for her, but she doesn't dare to get too close to Hua Fei. Hua Fei probably doesn't like her, but Hua Lily is very happy that her sister has her own flesh and blood. Fahrenheit's bloodline will eventually be passed on. But when Hua Fei was pregnant, one day she was knocked unconscious by Hua Fei, and when she woke up, she appeared on the spaceship of an arms dealer named Xiao in the Interstellar Alliance. He said that Hua Fei had given her to him. Xiao Yu raped her, and Hua Lily cried and screamed. Unfortunately, she had no mental power and was not Xiao Yu's opponent. People of the Hua family have outstanding mental talents, but they are not a race famous for fighting. She struggled weakly. At that moment, she hoped that her sister, who had been protecting her since childhood, would appear on the spaceship and rescue her. Xiao Yu got tired of playing with her and threw her away because she was just beautiful, like an incompetent vase. Xiao Yu looked down on her and even said when throwing her away, "It's such a waste that caused 2 planets to explode. Destruction is really ridiculous. The past glory of the Hua family is nothing more than this." She not only caused the Hua family and Pluto to disappear from the Galaxy Star Alliance, but also shamed her parents who had died long ago. In Xiao Yu's eyes, she was not even qualified to be a plaything. She was thrown on the most notorious planet of Camilla in the entire galaxy, which was full of violence and crime. When she was thrown from the air by Xiao Yu, she was already dying. She remembered that she wanted her sister to save her. Maybe Hua Fei was tired too. Originally, she had been thinking whether she had done something wrong to make her sister suddenly stop loving her. In the end, Hua Lily realized that there was no reason, it was just that Hua Fei didn't want her anymore, so Hua Fei threw her away. Got it? She had lived a cowardly life, and she was so helpless when she died. On that day, Pluto suffered changes because of her, but it was a pity that someone else needed to avenge this revenge for her. Maybe when my sister saw her, she remembered the revenge of the destruction of Pluto in the past. Maybe her existence was the source of her pain. At that moment, While Lily suddenly realized that some people cannot rely on themselves for a lifetime, and some feelings will always change. People can leave and their hearts can change. She actually wanted to avenge the Nye family's destruction of Pluto Prince that day, but unfortunately she didn't have the ability. Gu Chen led the team to destroy the Emperor planet that day, but with the advanced technology and new mecha equipment, most of the Nye family managed to escape and formed a group of interstellar pirates to penetrate the interstellar wormhole. Hua Bei does not have the ability to take revenge. In fact, deep down in her heart, she does not want revenge. If she could, she hoped to go back to the time when the Pluto Prince had not had the accident and her relatives and people were still alive. The Nye family also wanted to exchange mechas for her, and she would be brave enough to say she was willing. The people are willing to die for her, and she is also willing to sacrifice for the people. It's a pity that Lily entered the mission too late. After receiving the plot, Lily suddenly felt troubled, because the original owner seemed to have only one wish. At the end of the plot and memory, what appeared in her mind was the gentle face of Huafei in the past, the worried eyes of her parents, and her people. Regarding the respect for the royal family, it is obvious that the original owner's wish is to go back to the past. Back when Pluto still existed, the original owner was simply a pitiful little person who did not understand hatred. But because Lily entered the mission too late, Pluto had already been destroyed. How could she fulfill the original owner's wish? Could it be that the task has reached this point and it just cannot be completed? Lily suddenly frowned. This situation is more difficult than not knowing anything. The original owner's wish had been missed when she entered the mission. The plot has progressed to the present, and it has reached the time when she was exiled by Huafei. Thinking of the conversation between a man and a woman that she heard when entering the mission that day, and then thinking about the man fleeing naked on the spaceship, Lily was lying on the ground, and a heartbreaking coldness penetrated into her body from her back vest, making her feel the bones in her body that had begun to grow began to ache. This time when she entered the mission, if the plot goes by, Hua Bei should be played by Xiao Yu like a plaything. When he got tired of it, he banished her from the spaceship like space junk. She was thrown to the planet Camilla and died, but Lily entered the mission and was almost insulted, but suddenly it appeared that the Xiao family's spaceship had been hijacked. Other than that, her fate was similar to that of the original owner, except that her fate was greater, or there was a deviation in time. She was not thrown out of the spaceship a few months later, but because of an accident. Although she was still thrown out, she is still alive today. But the problem is that the mission is now a dead end. Even if you are still alive for the time being, what is the use? Lily covered her face with her hands, feeling too lazy to get up for a moment. If she guessed correctly, this should be the planet Camilla in the Interstellar Alliance. There is also another name for this place, which is the banished star that makes everyone change their color when mentioning it. This is a sinful planet that makes all human beings in the interstellar world change their minds after hearing about it. All humans who violate the laws of the Interstellar Alliance or violate the convention will be thrown here by their respective planets. There is no large amount of food and no energy here. There are no mechas, and it is full of the shadow of crime and death. If you want to survive in this place, a woman must either sell her skin and flesh and become a plaything, or she must have extremely strong strength to survive in this place where food and energy are in short supply. Place to live. Conventions have been formed between the major planets in the interstellar era, but all interstellar laws do not apply here. The strong survive here and the weak are eliminated. Dead people can be seen everywhere. It is also known as the Star of Sin. Thinking of this, Lily felt a long exhaling a breath. She wondered if it was her imagination. She always felt that after receiving the memories and plot, every breath here seemed to be filled with the smell of blood. The original owner's wish has failed, but the most important thing at the moment is how to survive on this exiled sinful star and find a way to leave here. But so far, this doesn't seem to be easy. To be continued. Canon Fodder strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1038. On the Sin Star, the shortage of food and energy threatens the life of everyone who survives at any time, and the fear of a lot of violence and death hangs in everyone's heart. People who are alive today may be lying dead on the streets in the future. People who are exiled here may not be able to leave this place for the rest of their lives if no one rescues them. However, this is not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing is the planet Myra is a place of exile. There is no energy here. The lack of energy means that if a mecha that can jump through wormholes cannot be created, the people who stay on the planet Camilla will not be able to leave this terrible planet for the rest of their lives. Despair is what really kills people and makes them crazy. Lily originally wanted to go into the city to look for food, but now she naturally didn't dare to go into the city at will. Now she is covered in injuries and has not fully recovered. Many of the exiled people in the city are famous villains in the Interstellar Alliance in the past, and there are many powerful humans among them. Lily may not survive if she enters the city like this. In 2 days, he will die. She lay there for a while, feeling so hungry that although she was panicking, she still got up. So far, after the valuable things on the mecha were taken away from the place where she crashed, no living person has been seen for several days. Maybe that is the safest place for the time being. During the day, she hid in the abandoned houses in that area, practicing star training while resisting the feeling of going crazy with hunger. Only at night did she appear on the plain, digging up the surface and collecting as much groundwater as possible. The shortage of food and water is enough to make people go crazy. Fortunately, the spiritual power absorbed into the body through the star training technique can keep the body's functions running slowly. Most people will die after starving for 7 or 8 days, but after having spiritual power in the body, her body could endure it for a longer time, until a month later, Lily finally couldn't bear it anymore, and her body's hunger had reached its limit. She was more than half thinner than when she first entered the mission, with only skin and bones left on her body. She finally couldn't help it and decided to go to the city. During this month, the serious injuries she suffered when she fell from the sky that day have completely healed. Her body was as light as a leaf. Although she was running fast, it did not consume her physical strength due to the movement of spiritual energy in her body. Planet Camilla is called the Star of Sin by outsiders. In Hua Lily's memory, the mere mention of it scares her, but it is beyond Lily's expectation. This city is not as dilapidated as I imagined, but instead exudes a kind of prosperity with a corrupt atmosphere. She was wearing a tattered dress. When Huafei sent her to the Xiao family's spaceship 2 months ago, the dress had already been torn in an accident. She smelled of blood and had not taken a bath for 2 months. It has to be uncomfortable. Apart from a rough look at her body shape, she could barely tell that she was a short woman. She didn't take a shower or change her clothes for 2 months, so her image couldn't be any better. But when she entered the city, the people in the city did not show surprise at her appearance. Most of the people here have numb expressions, and there are many people dressed like her on the street. In the Sin Star, water and food are very important. There are no weak people here. The real weak cannot survive at all. When Lily entered the city, many people in the city looked at her with ill intentions. After it was revealed that she was thin and not strong, many people's eyes showed a fierce light, as if to convey a message, "This is a woman." Someone was following her. Lily discovered it when she entered town early in the morning. She walked down the street at a slower pace. The prosperity of the city center is not inferior to the buildings of Pluto in Lily's memory, but hidden behind these tall buildings, she can vaguely see the rows of abandoned bungalows on the grassland where she temporarily lived. Dilapidated buildings. The place is extremely luxurious and extremely shabby. It obviously only exists in one city, but it seems to be divided into 2 worlds. The streets on both sides are similar to those on other planets. Yes, there are shops, but the shops here are not as dazzling as those on other planets. Most of the shops here only sell food and water, and a few sell weapons and energy. There are many burly men in front of such shops. Guarding, Lily was not interested in weapons at this time, so she naturally ignored it. She walked twice on the street to collect news and found that there were many people with the same purpose as her. At the same time, she also became the target of others and was followed along the way. Women are very rare things on this planet. Because most women are born with weaker bodies than men, when they fall into this planet, they are either sold as playthings or die at the hands of others. There are very few women can survive. Although Lily was wary of these looks, she didn't take them to heart. She set her sights on one of the most prosperous food stores. It had the largest store and the most food. Most importantly, it seemed that the people in the store were confident and not afraid. Like other stores, there are a lot of people guarding it. Once Lily decided on her target, she rushed into the store without hesitation. "Get out," a big, bare-chested man in the store gave Lily a cold look. After realizing that she didn't look like someone who could afford food, he punched her out unceremoniously. Lily did not dodge, but he punched her. This big man must be a master of physical skills. When he punched her, she could hear the crack of her already grown bones with pure physical strength alone. Sound. Even though she had summoned spiritual energy to resist the blow, the force of the punch broke her bones and made her body take a few steps back. In normal times, she would have run away if she couldn't beat Lily, but now she was so hungry and panicked, and she had grabbed everything anyway, so she advanced instead of retreating. The big man obviously didn't expect that he punched her, and not only was she not hurt, he was knocked out, but he just took 2 steps back, and rushed forward without even a groan and without fear of death. When he was a little frightened and angry in his heart, he let out a loud shout. The man who was standing at the counter on the other side narrowed his eyes when he heard his companion's greeting. The next moment, Lily felt a huge mental force, like a sharp needle piercing her mind. She endured it. With the pain gone and luck in his body, his palm silently touched the unknown crystallized glass. Several bags of compressed food and clean water were placed in the middle of the cabinet. Lily slapped it down with one palm. The glass only shattered and did not fall. Lily slapped it 7 or 8 times quickly, and the glass was not broken, but the cabinet was deformed by her knocking, but it could not be broken. The eyes of the 2 big men guarding the store showed fear. On the planet Camilla, food bombardment happens every day. It's true, but there are only a few people who are as bold as Lily and dare to rush into the store to rob. The 2 of them had a ferocious look in their eyes, and they attacked Lily at the same time. When Lily saw something bad, she simply pulled the cabinet and attacked the naked upper body. The big man smashed it over. She couldn't break the crystallized glass, but it was much easier to move the cabinet than to break the glass. The big man struck at her with his fist, but when he saw that she was using the cabinet to block him, it was too late to stop. The cabinet had been deformed by Lily. This time, the big man's force hit him. Lily exerted force at the same time. When the 2 forces collided, there was only a crisp sound of dang, and the big man's arm was inserted straight into the box. The combination lock of the box was damaged by brute force, and it suddenly cracked. The cabinet hung in the hands of the big man. His arms were dripping with blood and his face showed pain. Lily took the opportunity to break the broken place. Once the cabinet has cracks, it will be much easier for Lily to reach out and pat it again. She took a few bottles of water and held them in her arms, and took a bunch of compressed food. She stretched out her toes and kicked between the big man's legs. She resisted the mental attack from the other side and turned around and ran away without hesitation. "If you dare to grab food here, you are really too old." The store was in a mess, with looks of shock and anger on their faces. By the time the big man tore off the cabinet he was wearing, locked the store door with an electronic lock and chased him out, Lily had already run extremely far away. When the two of them chased her out, she was injured at this time and it was unlikely that she would be their match. She gritted her teeth and opened a pack of compressed food and threw it out. The people who had been following her secretly saw the scene and rushed forward like crazy. These hungry people grabbing food stopped the two men from pursuing her, and Lily took advantage of the chaos and ran away without a trace. At first, she felt that there were people following her, but when Lily ran away with her spiritual power, she ran extremely fast, and gradually got rid of these people. However, she still felt that the sense of crisis had not disappeared, and she felt like someone had beaten her down in her mind. Like a spiritual mark, Lily couldn't erase the mark for the time being, so she could only seal it with spiritual power. There is definitely no way back to the place where I lived before. It seems that there are not many foreign visitors on this planet Camilla. I fell into this planet before, and it was easy for others to suspect me. There were originally many abandoned old houses on the Sin planet, most of which had been inhabited by people before. However, as hunger and violence occurred from time to time on this planet, the death toll increased, and there were many empty and abandoned streets and houses. He ran in the opposite direction from where he fell before, found an abandoned street to hide again, and then breathed a sigh of relief. This food is not much. One bag of compressed food can last for many days. As long as she saves some and doesn't waste it. If she doesn't want to fill her stomach and just wants to save her life, these bottles of water and food will be enough for her to survive for 2 months. Big deal. It's okay to go into the city and rob once in 2 months. Lily was still holding her breath, worried that the people in the city would chase her out, but she didn't know if it was because there were so many abandoned places in the Sin Star, and because she had wrapped the other party's mental mark, she didn't know what to do that night. No one came. She tore up the compressed food and ate it. She felt that the hunger in her belly gradually stopped. She drank more water and then pushed her broken ribs back into place. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1039. At this time, the improvement of strength is imminent. After Lily robbed things these days, she did not dare to stay in the same place for a long time. She divided the food she robbed into many portions and only ate some every 2 days, as long as it could keep her alive. It is definitely impossible to fill her stomach. Sometimes she spends most of her time practicing physical skills and martial arts. 2 months later, after finishing the food in her hands, she can endure it for a while, and then she entered the city once. This time Lily entered the city again, and the security in the city was much tighter than before. Most of the homeless people who could be seen everywhere when she first entered the city were missing. She was targeted as soon as she entered the city. After 2 months of recuperation, Lily's injuries from the last time she was beaten have long been healed. And in the past 2 months, as her injuries healed, once the movements of Xingqian's physical training were standardized and neat, the introduction of there is naturally more starlight power in her body than before, and she is stronger now than she was 2 months ago. But similarly, among the shops on both sides of the street, there are obviously more people guarding the shops than before. When Lily entered the city, someone was following her. Although the people in the store didn't catch her during the food robbery 2 months ago, they were obviously alert. Many food-selling shops were mostly guarded by 4 or 5 people instead of 2. There seemed to be no people there, but Lily could feel that these people were much more dangerous. This time she was stronger than 2 months ago, but Lily did the opposite. She no longer stared at the shops with fewer people, but instead spotted a shop with more people and rushed in. If it were 2 months ago, she would definitely not have done such a thing. At that time, her strength was still very weak. He had just recovered from his injury, and he rushed into a crowded place rashly. He was unable to defeat 4 people with just 2 fists, and the end would definitely not be good. She picked stores with few people simply because the stores with few people must be powerful and powerful. Generally, no one would dare to take advantage of the people in these stores, so she grabbed them by surprise. Now it is clear that these people are asking you to enter the urn. Naturally, she would not go in stupidly again. She rushed into a crowded shop. Although these people were generally quite strong, Lily still managed to escape by snatching part of the food, but this time the price paid was also high. Although she used her spiritual power to wrap up the food left by others, the mental mark on her body was still there, but before leaving the city, someone threw a heavy object on her back vest, leaving a wound that was deeply visible to the bones. Lily endured the pain and used her spiritual power to seal the wound. But I don't know if it was because the injury was too serious, or if she pulled the wound while running. It wasn't until she ran nearly 10 miles out of the city that the wound stopped dripping blood. The people following her no longer had any mental imprints to detect, nor did they. She was slowly shaken off from the pursuit of the smell of blood. This time she grabbed more food. It was enough for her to eat for a long time. She practiced martial arts while recuperating from her injuries, and stayed dormant for nearly half a year. Time flies by in a blink of an eye. It has been more than 5 years since Lily was thrown from the spaceship. In the following time, Lily has been lurking outside the city, occasionally going into the city to rob when she is hungry. As time goes by with the passage of time and the fact that Lily spent all her free time practicing star training and Tao Te Ching, her strength increased rapidly. Started about a year ago. She can no longer get hurt when she goes to the city to rob, and there are few people in the city who can no longer be her opponent. She found that whether it was because Rong Li gave his thousands of years of cultivation to her, or whether there were other reasons, her practice of the Tao Te Ching was far more effective than the Nine Yang scripture combined with physical training. As strength increases, Lily discovered that the body of the original owner did not have any mental power at all during the past 5 years. She went to the city several times to rob food, and each time she was left with a mental mark. If it weren't for her own spiritual power and being very sensitive to these external mental marks, she might not have noticed it. These are spiritually imprinted. She couldn't use her mental power to get rid of these marks left on her body by others. She had to use her spiritual power to forcibly remove them every time. Moreover, on the Pluto Prince, the formulas for cultivating mental power in the original Master's book are not of much use to Lily. It is as if this body was born abandoned by the Huashi bloodline and has not inherited any of the spirit of the people on the Pluto Prince. Talent. She had tried to practice mental strength and physical training at the same time. After all, if the two complemented each other, Lily believed that her strength would increase quickly, but it had no effect. But in addition to the lack of mental power, this body is unexpectedly suitable for practicing physical skills. And half a year ago, Lily faintly felt another energy hidden in the body's blood, as if it was sealed by something. If it hadn't been accidentally, the flow of spiritual power while practicing spells resonated with this blood volume, and I'm afraid she couldn't feel it at all. In the plot, the original owner has no memory of this at all, so the original owner must not know about this inexplicable power. There was something unknown hidden in her body, so Lily naturally wanted to find out what it was. I don't know what kind of existence this unknown thing is, and I don't know if it can hurt herself. However, in half a year, no matter how many methods Lily used, she failed to successfully draw out this power. After thousands of tests, she was sure that there was such a thing in her body. Any other tests she did were like holding many keys, but none of them were correct enough to open the door. Lily kept practicing star training, feeling that her body seemed to be integrated with the power of the surrounding stars. She let a spiritual force to swim through her body, and there seemed to be something following her in her muscles, veins, bones and blood. The spiritual power moves around and is ready to move, but it always fails to break through the cage. Lily performed the star training technique twice, sighed a little depressedly, and stopped. In the past 6 months, She had been trying to try this energy every day, but she was disappointed every time. It had been several days since she had eaten. There were compressed food packages lying around. There was still enough water in the water bottle for her to take 2 or 3 sips. It seemed that she was going to go into the city to rob again today. By now Lily was no longer as nervous as she was at the beginning when she went to the city to rob again. No one has come to Camilla Planet in the past 5 years or so. There are very few outsiders, and because women are rare, the probability of newborns being born here is not high. So far, the city has once again moved closer to the center. In just 5 years, the city outside that day had been abandoned, and many more abandoned houses had appeared. It is conceivable that if this situation continues, within a few thousand years, this world's famous exiled star will become a real exiled planet, with few humans living here. She entered the city, dressed in shabby clothes. In the past few years, she came regularly to rob food. Her strength became more and more fierce every time, and she gradually made the people in the city wary of her. Fortunately, she only robbed certain things at a time and did not kill anyone. Therefore, when people in the city saw her entering the city, many people recognized her and showed a bit of fear on their faces, but they also knew that she was not easy to mess with. No one dared to follow her anymore. Lily was walking on the street and accidentally landed on this planet. For more than 5 years, she devoted her mind to practicing martial arts every day. Whenever she went into the city, she would either rob food or run away in panic. She rarely had that free time. Went into the city during the day to look around the city. There are still many homeless people in the city, and many of them are huddled in the corners, with very numb expressions on their faces. She entered a store. Most of the people who have survived to this day on this planet are already masters. When they saw Lily entering the store, many people were already familiar with this inexplicable outsider who suddenly appeared more than 5 years ago. There is simply no one as terrifying as her. Her strength is getting stronger every time, and she has no mental power. She can compete with those with superior mental power by purely using force. The physical strength of the people in Sin City is not as strong as hers, and for physical practitioners, mental practitioners are like a nightmare and have no effect on her. Even if the spiritual mark was sometimes left on her body, it was a pity that it was always interrupted for unknown reasons. For 5 years, no one found a solution. At this moment, he saw Lily coming to grab food again. The big man in the store couldn't beat her, and he couldn't do anything to her, so he ignored her actions. On planet Camilla, the strong are respected, and whoever has the bigger fist is the boss. Fortunately, Lily is measured and will not take too much at one time. The big man watched Lily's actions with cold eyes. Seeing that the crystallized glass, which could not even be penetrated by ordinary mechanical bullets, shattered under the gentle pressure of her hands, she picked out a few packages of compressed food with a matter-of-fact expression, and took another. The water went out. The big man squinted his eyes and saw that her figure was out of sight, so he took out a machine with red light from under his clothes. "Sir, she's out." When she was getting food and preparing to leave the city, Lily tore a bag of compressed food and stuffed it into her mouth. She hadn't eaten for several days. This move made people on both sides of the street shine green in their eyes, but everyone knew what she looked like. It was not easy to mess with, so even though many people were extremely greedy, they did not rush forward rashly. She left the bustling area of the city and was less than 500 meters out of the city when a small group of burly men in leather armor stopped her. The leader was a man who was about 40 years old. He had black hair combed back and was tall. As for Wang Xiao, when he saw Lily coming out, there was a dangerous look in his eyes, but the corners of his mouth curled up, as if he had been waiting for Lily for a long time. "Are you full?" he asked her gently, like a friend who had known Lily for many years. The big man behind him stood like a wooden sculpture. To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1040. There were people with mental powers in this group of people, and their levels were not low, so Lily only discovered the existence of these people when she was about to get close. I just don't know if these people already knew that she would leave from here, or if they have ambushed their men everywhere. At first, these people seemed to be standing dozens of meters away, but after taking 2 steps, they seemed to have walked 10 meters away in 1 step. In the blink of an eye, they appeared in front of Lily. It seemed that they did have some skills. Her eyes turned cold, and she temporarily put the half-pack of compressed food in her hand on the ground. She took out the water bottle and took a few sips, swallowed the food, and then began to look at the people in front of her. There is news about me all around the planet, Camilla. We have already noticed your presence. When the young lady entered the city, the tall and thin man seemed to know what she was thinking, grinning at the corners of his mouth, his eyes there was a probing look in it, as if he wanted to see through her embarrassed appearance, to see into her heart. In the past few years, you have eaten a lot of my food and injured many of my men. As an outsider, don't you think, should you say something to me? Lily didn't say anything, and she didn't feel guilty because of the man's words. On this planet, there is violence and crime everywhere. The food store in the city can belong to a powerful person today, but if there is someone stronger than him tomorrow, it will be easily taken away. It doesn't matter whoever robs them. This man might have made his fortune by robbing other people's things, just to survive. However, this man claims that the food store is his territory, which proves that this man's strength is definitely extraordinary, and Lily has been in the food store in these 5 years. I have visited several stores one after another, but the store I go to each time is not necessarily the same one. There are so many places selling food that all belong to the same person. You can imagine how dangerous this man is. He tightened the water bottle in his hand and placed it on the ground. Lily took a deep breath, and a large amount of spiritual power from heaven and earth began to pour into her body. After the man finished speaking, he seemed to realize that what he said before was a bit ridiculous, and laughed. But follow Lily's actions. The smile on his face gradually faded. What kind of ability is this? He grinned and stretched out his right thumb to wipe the corner of his mouth with a dangerous look in his eyes. It looks like a physical practitioner, but it's a little different. It's really interesting. He closed his eyes, and the old shirt on his body began to shake slightly. When he opened his eyes again, his eyes were full of evil. What kind of skill? It's really weird. It's a bit like physical training, but physical training can't be so powerful. People who have dealt with you said that you were as weak as an insect 5 years ago. Where were you born? Planet, he asked, and Lily opened her mouth. She had not spoken to anyone for several years, plus the compressed food she had just swallowed. Her throat was still a little hoarse at the moment. She was unable to answer immediately. The man seemed to have never been so neglected before and sneered. It's okay if you don't want to say it. People who have just come to Camilla Planet will always have such an adaptation process. It's really rare to be a woman and an individual magician. A woman like this will never die easily. Take away. In the past few years, the man first heard someone robbing his food store. It was very shocking at first. But he sent his men to search. The planet was so big, and this woman seemed to be very good at hiding, so she had to change her residence every once in a while. His men were never able to find her. Originally it was just some food, which was in short supply for ordinary people. But to this man, it was nothing. But since more than a year ago, the news reported to him by his subordinates has made this man gradually uneasy. Although the woman who robbed the food seemed to be brave and not afraid of death at first, her strength was still very low. Under the siege of his 2 men, even if she could escape, she would have to pay a price. But I don't know when her strength began to grow. It became more and more terrifying. In just 5 years, she was able to calmly escape from a group of big men who she could not defeat even two, and successfully escaped without any harm. His subordinates can no longer keep her, and this woman is not a person with outstanding mental power. The people who deal with her replied that she does not have the slightest mental power fluctuations on her body, but every time someone else imprints a mental power mark on her body, it will appear every time. It will be forcibly eliminated after a while. It was not that he used mental power that was much stronger than his own to cut it off, but that he used a method that the people who used mental power didn't know to eliminate these marks. The terrifying strength growth pattern, coupled with some weird behaviors, made this man decide to kill Lily half a year ago. I don't know what she practices, nor which planet she is in exile from, but if Lily is allowed to grow, one day she may not even be her opponent. In the past 5 years, each time he allowed her to take away a certain amount of food, it had an impact on his reputation on the planet. If he could conquer Lily, he originally planned to conquer Lily, but to his surprise unexpectedly, Lily was a woman, and physical training aroused his interest. At this time, the man changed his mind and his eyes shone. As soon as he finished speaking, Lily only saw him take a step back. It was obvious that the step was not big, but it seemed that he had retreated 10 meters away in one step. Several strong men wearing leather armor came towards her. She was about to when he wanted to take action. The man not far away laughed, "I know you are very skilled." When this man spoke, his voice seemed like an extremely sharp needle, piercing into her mind. The large amount of spiritual energy surrounding the body suddenly stagnated, and the spiritual energy in the body suddenly became somewhat chaotic. Lily was shocked and angry. This man was a man with outstanding mental power, and his mental power level should not be low, because as his words fell, the tingling pain in his mind did not dissipate, but became more and more serious. She suppressed her headache, mobilized her spiritual power and began to wrap up the spiritual power that invaded her mind. When this spiritual power was controlled and her expression gradually returned to calmness, the man opposite was obviously surprised that she was so quick. Time will dissipate his attack. Huh? He questioned her, and the big man surrounding Lily had already rushed forward. Physical practitioners have no advantage in front of Lily. Those who rush to the front are the first to be knocked to the ground by her, losing the ability to fight back. Seeing that the situation was not good for him, the man obviously did not expect this at first. His face was gloomy, his hand suddenly made a strange seal, and he began to shout, "Slow down, mental restraint." For an instant, Lily felt like she was stuck in a quagmire, and the changes in the surrounding scenery began to become slow and dull. Her eyes saw that her actions were much slower than before, as if she was watching a slow movie, but on the contrary, yes, the leather-armored men surrounding her seemed to move more than 10 times faster than before. A fist hit her lower abdomen heavily. Lily knew clearly that she should avoid it sideways or use spiritual power to move her body. Wrapping it up, but she just moved slowly. With a bang sound, the fist hit her lower abdomen, and a sharp pain spread from her lower abdomen, and her body was suddenly bombarded by the punch. However, the sequelae caused by the mental attack did not dissipate. She should have moved extremely fast when flying out, but in her eyes, everything became slow motion. Once those big men succeeded, they rushed forward quickly, and a chill ran down Lily's back. If she allowed this to continue, no matter how strong she was, she would fall into the hands of these people sooner or later. Although the memory of the original owner proved that people with psychic abilities are very powerful, but the first time they fought against a powerful person with psychic abilities, it couldn't be described as just powerful, it was simply too scary. Mental attacks are not limited to physical attacks. After discovering that mental attacks were useless to her, this man began to use mental powers to invade her nerves. He knew clearly that the slow movements were his own illusions, but the illusions created by mental powers were, but she couldn't escape at all. She can resist ordinary mental attacks with her spiritual power, but this kind of cooperation is so pervasive that she has no way to block it for the time being. She had known that the characters in this evil star were scary, but because she had not encountered such masters before, she could retreat every time she grabbed food. But this time she got into trouble, and Lily decided to run away. She didn't even look at the food on the ground. When the group of big men rushed forward and punched her again, she groaned, and there was a sound of breaking ribs in her chest. Fortunately, she had a strong body. Although her bones were broken after the punch, it was not a fatal injury. The most important thing was that she recovered a little under the severe pain. When her body was blown away, she used the force to escape in the opposite direction. When the man not far away saw this, a cold look appeared on his face. "Want to run? Stop, mental brand." He made a weird gesture in his hand, and Lily's body, which was originally flying, fell from the air with a bang and fell heavily to the ground. A far stronger mental attack than before, an even greater amount of spiritual power invaded her mind, giving her a splitting headache. After invading her spiritual sea, it began to spread to her body muscles. This kind of severe pain seemed to be torn into two parts, causing Lily to break out in a large amount of cold sweat on her back. She let out a quick gasp, suppressed the splitting headache and sat up. At the same time, he summoned a large amount of star power into his body. Although the man's mental imprint was powerful, it was gradually controlled under the influence of spiritual power. It seemed that it had been sealed in his body, even though the mysterious power that Lily had been trying to draw out all these times was now in his mind. Under the intertwining of the power and the spiritual power of the stars, it began to tremble. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1041. A majestic power began to rush through the veins of her body like an awakened beast. Lily's face turned green and red, cold air surged from her bones and blood, and the pain and discomfort seemed to break out of the cage. Her body was like the cage that locked this power, and the amount of blood seemed to burst her body. This power traveled faster and faster inside her body, swallowing up the spiritual power while also beginning to swallow up the spiritual power. Although the swallowing of external spiritual power reduced Lily's pressure, once the spiritual power was swallowed up, she felt a little terrible. She forcibly controlled this power, and this unknown power brought with it an overwhelming chill, making her face look as white as paper, and her body began to tremble instinctively due to the sudden cold. The muscles and veins were stimulated by the coldness, and the pain caused by the contraction made Lily's eyes cold. The huge flow of power caused the capillaries to rupture, and blood droplets came out from the pores, making her look a bit ferocious and frightening. Terror. Lily felt a murderous intention in her heart, and the changes in her body made her a little anxious, and all these changes were brought about by these people. It is useless to run away at this time. If you run away this time, you will still encounter her again in the future. The most important thing is that there is such an enemy, which is like her natural nemesis. Today this man wants her to die. She wanted this man to die earlier than she did. She refused to advance but retreated. Once she controlled this inexplicable force, she no longer ran away like she just did, but instead faced the group of big men. The big man running at the front never thought that she would be able to fight back after being mentally branded. He ran fast and felt something was wrong when Lily came up to him, so he had to hide. But due to inertia, he couldn't stop for a while, not to mention that Lily was no slower than him, appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye, and hooked his neck. He didn't react at all, and his hands were still clenched into fists to maintain the gesture of wanting to hit Lily. Lily quickly held his head with both hands, as if it was just a slight pressure. There was just a pop sound, but the big man's head seemed to be squeezed by gravity, like a crushed vegetable. The skin was not broken, but the bones and flesh underneath were cracked. the big man died instantly, and his face was crisscrossed with cyan marks. These were the marks formed after the skull was ruptured under the infusion of a large amount of spiritual power, but the skin was intact and blood could not flow out. A large amount of blood gushed out from his mouth, eyes, and nostrils. At the moment before he died, he still maintained the posture of punching. It was just because Lily smashed his head in an instant, so his arms were still tight and the muscles on his arms were clear. It can be seen, but because his body has lost its vitality, when the last punch hit Lily, the strength has been reduced a lot. This punch failed to knock Lily away again like before. On the contrary, the already dead man couldn't bear the force of the rebound, and fell to the sky with a dong sound. His terrifyingly twisted face turned to the side, and a lot of dust was splashed. Before, she had no power to fight back, and could only flee in panic under the big leader's mental attack. But the next moment, she broke free from the control of the mental brand, and casually beat the big man to death. That big man is already at the 5th level of physical skills, and is considered a top-notch master in the entire galaxy. But in front of Lily, he seemed vulnerable. And this was still under the condition that Lily was attacked by mental power. It is conceivable that if this man who is good at mental power did not show up today, even if these group magic masters besieged her, they might not be able to keep her at all. The man not far away saw that she could still have such fighting power after being restrained by her own mental power. His face instantly turned cold and he clenched his fists. A handprint was quickly formed. "Feng, draw a cocoon to bind you." As soon as he finished speaking, Lily felt a huge amount of spiritual power coming from all directions. Her steps forward suddenly stagnated, and she was immediately stopped. This spiritual power did not seal her body, but seemed to restrain her nerves and the spiritual power flowing in the muscles and veins in her body, pouring in layer by layer like a wave, overwhelming the earth. It was as if this spiritual power had completely cut off her contact with the spiritual power of heaven and earth, tightly restricting the flow of spiritual power in Lily's body. The moment she lost her spiritual power, Lily's legs went weak. The pain that had just broken her body began to invade into her limbs without the comfort of her spiritual power. She was obviously not restrained by anything. But at this moment Lily felt a suffocating feeling like being entangled by a python. The severe pain in her chest made her breathless. The next moment she heard a man shouting, "Kill her!" The man's mental attacks failed twice in a row. He originally wanted to capture Lily. After all, women are very rare on this planet. This place is not suitable for the weak to survive. Women are naturally physically weaker than men. He originally wanted to capture Lily. Lily caught her, controlled her, made her his own, and made her his captive. But now it seems that in just a few years, he almost failed to capture her personally. If she is allowed to escape this time, a deadly feud has been formed between the two. After another 3 to 5 years, her physical skills will, once her level is higher than her own mental power, won't she be the one to control her? Although he felt it was a pity to kill such a woman, the man still issued a kill order without hesitation. "Are you going to die here?" The mental power invaded her nerves and muscles pervasively. The shadow of severe pain and death made Lily sweat all over her body. She gritted her teeth and tried to struggle, desperately trying to break through the shackles of this mental power. To communicate with the spiritual power of the stars in the outside world, she was unwilling to die here. She saw that the man who was restraining her with his mental power was pale, and his situation was obviously no better than hers. Unfortunately, she was indeed restrained at this moment. There was murderous intent in Lily's eyes, and she tried her best to raise her hand. She saw the remaining big men rushing toward her with murderous intent on their faces, getting closer and closer to her. Amidst the rapid heartbeat of dong dong dong, their spiritual power seemed to explode, using her body as a battlefield. After the war, it seemed that her muscles and veins could no longer withstand such torment. The mysterious power hidden in her body began to be more and more agitated under the action of these two forces. Lily's face became more and more ugly, and her mental power drove her. The restraints became tighter and tighter, and the pain all over her body made her unable to hold on any longer, and she fell to one knee on the ground with a bang. Stimulated by a large amount of mental power, the inexplicable power in her body began to resonate, and the vibration became louder and louder. Like a flash flood, the mysterious power that she had been trying to draw out but had been unable to draw out at this moment burst out from the bone marrow, veins and flesh, as if the cage holding it was finally overwhelmed and was forced to break through. Wherever this force goes, bone-chilling chills and pain are felt in the veins, and once it flows through a certain place, the mental power that originally tightly bound Lily will be swallowed up and melted by it. Just in the blink of an eye, Lily, the body that had been unable to move, seemed to have returned to its original shape. Lily was shocked and confused, but this was not the time to study this power. The big man who wanted to kill her was already rushing in front of her. It was too late for her to take action again, so she fell to the ground in embarrassment, turned around, and stretched out her hands to support herself. On the ground, the body turned around in a circle like a flag fluttering in the wind. The legs swept the ankles of these big men and quickly swept these big men to the ground. Although the several big men are very skilled, the most difficult one to deal with is still the man with mental power. To capture the thief first, capture the king. Although he doesn't know why he suddenly and briefly regained his mobility, Lily still regained control of her body. At that moment, he decided to kill that man first. If she is always entangled by these people, as long as the man survives, she will have no peace for a day. Lily's thoughts at this moment coincided with the man's previous desire to kill and silence him. She took advantage of the moment when several big men were knocked to the ground to get up and rush towards the man. At this point, the man obviously didn't expect that she would still be able to fight back, and his whole body felt bad. Originally, it took a lot of man's mental energy to control her, but he didn't expect that in just a split second, the energy he unleashed would be lost in the ocean. When he saw her charging towards him, the man was startled. "You!" Before he could finish his words, Lily jumped up and kicked him on the chest. There was a bang. Although the man's mental strength was excellent, his physical skills were not very good. The kick was so strong that several ribs were broken. A large amount of blood spurted out from his mouth and flew straight out. But this time, he didn't die. Instead, he lay on the ground, stretching out his hands to get up. Lily rushed over again, ready to stomp on his head. She quickly decided to find a place to hide and recuperate while studying her own. When the superpower was activated, before his legs were stretched out, the man suddenly grasped something and turned around. His face was already covered in blood, and his eyes were a little ferocious. "Go to hell." He held a light nuclear weapon in his hand, which he had activated at this time. The two of them were so close that it was impossible to avoid them. The dazzling light made Lily subconsciously close her eyes. At the critical moment of life and death, Lily was so angry that she wanted to curse her mother. In the original plot, Camilla's planet had no technology at all, lacked food and water, had no weapons, and no mechas. Because of this, she always felt that she could survive in this place as long as she was more careful. Come down, but why does this man have a nuclear weapon in his hand at this time? She was not willing to die, but the two of them were so close, and the beam of light shot straight towards her body, like the scythe of death. It would be too late to hide anymore. Lily was still not willing to die, so she subconsciously blocked her body with her hand. In front of his own body, he tried his best to shift his body, and tried his best to attract the spiritual power of heaven and earth to protect his body. To be continued.